In this video, I'm doing a full walkthrough of the Gnoll fight in Act 1 on Tactician difficulty. The first thing you can see me do here is pressing Shift to be aware of the detection areas of the enemies. I then unlink my party members from one another by pressing G on my keyboard in order to ensure that I can position all of them individually. I'm using Shadowheart mostly as a buff and heal cleric, so I make sure to place her somewhere where she should be able to reach all my party members with both healing and party-wide spells. I then moved both Gale and Will to the high ground since both of them are performing the role of ranged casters with a focus on damage. This way, they do get the +2 bonus on their attack rolls from the high ground, and they are better protected from enemies trying to reach them for any melee attacks. Lastly, I jump in front with my Barbarian to trigger the fight. The reasoning here is to draw more attention to him, hopefully keeping some attacks from both of the NPCs that I'd like to survive. Unfortunately, my characters are quite low in the initiative order, so I have to see how things play out first. The first thing the boss Gnoll does is throw an Alchemist Fire into my group. He does a little bit of damage, but he also destroys the ladder leading up to Will and Gale. This is good for me because it's now more difficult to reach their high ground and attack them. In the meantime, I examine my enemies one more time to make sure I don't miss out on any majorly important abilities or resistances. The boss is clearly a problem, being able to grant bonus action bites to some of the other Gnolls and getting multiple attacks in 2 turns. Due to his large amount of health though, I decide to focus on other enemies first. The Gnoll Hunter should ideally die quickly to make sure the extra attack it gets after 1 turn has as little impact as possible. I also want to avoid having it down any characters with melee attacks to not trigger additional free bites. The Hyenas need to either be kept far enough from their allies, or they need to die quickly as well, so that their pack advantage doesn't come into play. The Gnoll Fang, like the Hunter, should primarily be kept from downing any characters in melee to avoid additional bites. And when it comes to the Flesh Gnawer, Bloodthirst is something to look out for, as this Gnoll already is able to use bite attacks as bonus actions, making it likely to attack twice each turn. Now, my Raven is the first thing I can control. Considering amazing damage spells such as Cloud of Daggers at my disposal, I decide to use the Raven as prey to lure more of the Gnolls closer together. In that instance, I fully accept that this might sacrifice the Raven rather quickly. Luckily, that strategy worked like a charm, luring 2 of the Gnolls to exactly where I wanted them, while they did no real harm during that turn. At this point, it is time to unleash Cloud of Daggers and start doing some damage. I'm being very careful when it comes to the positioning of the area spell. First, I want to hit all 3 Gnolls if possible. Secondly, I want to keep my Raven alive so it can tank at least 1 more attack. And lastly, I want to cover the largest area possible between my party and the 2 Hyenas so that they hopefully run through it when approaching. Knowing that my Raven won't stay alive for long, I accept a bit of fire damage when sending my Barbarian into the midst of the fight. Positioning him this way means he can attack the enemy while also ensuring I leave a target up front that keeps everyone close to the Cloud of Daggers. When evaluating what type of melee attack to go for, I decide on not having the Great Weapon Master feat bonus damage active because it comes with a penalty on the attack roll. 51% is too much of a gamble for me here, so I take the higher chance of actually connecting even if the guaranteed damage is lower, which in this case was still enough for a kill. When the Hyenas approach to attack my Raven and the Barbarian, both Hyenas lose more than 50% of their total health points as I run through the Cloud of Daggers. So far, the positioning worked like a charm. The first thing I do when it is Shadowheart's turn is to cast the Aid spell. Usually I do so right after every long rest, but here I wanted to ensure that the 2 NPCs get their health increase as well, even at the cost of using an action for the spell during battle. Next then is to ensure effective use of all possible actions during each turn. In Shadowheart's case, it is to also cast a heal with the remaining bonus action. Casting it on herself seemed like the best choice based on lost HP so far. With Gale, I consider my moves first. Cloud of Daggers does damage when it is cast, but also at the beginning of someone's turn, if they stand in it. So the 2 Gnolls might actually die to the daggers without being able to do anything else when it is their turn. Since it's usually a good idea in Baldur's Gate 3 to focus on actually killing enemies rather than spreading the damage around, I then use the cold version of the Chromatic Orb spell on one of the Hyenas. The reason for that is to hopefully kill the hyena and simultaneously create an ice surface that any Gnoll that survives the next Cloud of Dagger hit stumbles on. Unfortunately, Gale misses, but at least we still got the ice surface. Next up is the boss Gnoll, who deals some damage but fails to apply paralysis. Then, both NPCs are pushing forward a bit too much here for my taste, after my barbarian perfectly lured the boss Gnoll towards him as well, keeping the rest of my allies somewhat safe for now. Luckily, they do at least kill one of the hyenas by pushing it into the Cloud of Daggers. Next would have been one of the Gnolls, but as planned, it dies to the incoming damage right at the beginning of its turn. So I can freely choose between Will and my barbarian here, going for the melee attack first. I start with activating Rage to increase the damage my barbarian is dealing and to get resistance against physical attacks in order to survive longer. When checking the health of one of the remaining Gnolls, I know that it will die at the start of its next turn due to the Cloud of Daggers, so I don't care about that one anymore. After briefly considering to attack the boss to not waste damage when killing the last hyena with only 4 health, I still go for the hyena. Again, focus kills are more important to me to reduce the amount of enemy combatants. Despite using Reckless Attack for a second roll when initially missing the hyena, my barbarian still fails to kill it though. Adding to my frustration, Will fails to properly kill it afterwards as well, leaving it on the battlefield as a threat. Back to Shadowheart, my next move is far from clear, since I tend to play her less focused on a particular main role and more as a utility character that reacts to each turn's needs more than the rest of the party. I briefly considered using a charm spell, but abandoned that idea considering how unlikely it was to succeed. With 14 wisdom, the boss gets a +2 on saving throws against charm, and due to the proficiency, it is a total of +5, leaving me with a meager 12% success chance. Instead, I go for a damage spell, and giving the high chance of success as well as the potential damage dealt, I ignore my focus kill rule and go for the boss right away. I then also use a bonus action for a heal to make sure my barbarian remains in good shape on the front line. After all, he did take a few hits already, but I need him alive. With Will, it's now all about damage. Not wanting to risk another miss here, I upcast Magic Missile to have 4 projectiles with a 100% hit chance. Now one of the 4-sided dice would be enough to kill the hyena if a 4 is rolled. I don't like those odds though, so I shoot 2 projectiles at the hyena and the remaining 2 at the boss, finally getting rid of the hyena. A quick health potion to not waste the bonus action and Gale is done. Following now, the boss first hits my barbarian quite hard, and then one of the NPCs unnecessarily wastes the action to kill the Gnoll that would have died anyway. But with some damage from the second NPC, it's time to let my barbarian get revenge for that major hit just earlier. At this point, I'm feeling comfortable to end this fight soon. So I use a speed potion for additional actions on my barbarian, confident that the lethargic status effect that gets applied after 3 turns won't matter anymore. One action is then used to heal a few of the lost health points, only to then fail again with the attack. At this point, I'm regretting a bit for not having cast Bless with Shadowheart to improve my attack rolls, which is something I do quite often otherwise. With Will, I then decide to use his second spell slot to recast Cloud of Daggers on top of the boss Gnoll. This is done deliberately in a way that allows for the barbarian to still attack and also to reposition him to allow for a shove back into the daggers in case the boss moves out of the spell area. I then also use a health potion to not waste the bonus action and end Will's turn. With Shadowheart, I use both action and bonus action to try and heal my barbarian as much as possible, expecting the boss to continue attacking him based on current positioning. I carefully consider where to place Shadowheart for the melee heal, making sure she uses the barbarian as cover. As long as my barbarian stands, this should remain an easy fight by now. Because of that, I also upcast the heal to get the most health points out of this spell, even though it does use up Shadowheart's last rank 2 spell slot. It is more important to me here to keep my barbarian alive rather than to consider dealing additional damage by using a damage spell with Shadowheart. Following with Gale, I ponder what spell might be best here, but due to a few misses already, I take the safe route and simply upcast Magic Missile once more, this time with all projectiles on the boss. A quick spell slot potion to the end, just in case the next round isn't the last after all. Next up are the NPCs again, both now finally focusing on the boss rather than wasting some of the actions on unnecessary attacks. After a bit of damage dealt to the boss by the NPCs, my barbarian gets another shot at revenge for all the hits he's endured already. At the beginning of his turn, I first reposition him slightly, as planned earlier already when placing the new Cloud of Daggers. The plan here is to allow him to shove the boss into the daggers after using up the regular action and the second one granted by the speed potion. Unfortunately, my barbarian misses one of his attacks, failing to kill the boss right away in case of a successful shove. Luckily, the shove itself at least succeeded, which leaves the boss almost defeated, having only 15 health points left. The fight is not over just yet though, so I evaluate what spell is most likely with Will to do the trick. But based on the limited amount of damage and the low chance of success, neither is compelling really. So I simply pick one of them, which in the end didn't matter much anyway, considering that he misses a shot. Next up is Shadowheart, now simply going for damage too. But her coin flip at 50% hit chance fails as well, leaving the boss still alive with 15 health points. And when Gale shoots another 4 magic missiles at the boss continues to taunt me by staying alive with a single health point. But as we know by now, Cloud of Daggers deals damage at the start of each turn, and so at this point, the fight is more or less done, leaving it to the MVP spell of this fight to deal the last damage and end the battle with all participants on my side surviving. I hope this walkthrough can add some value to your own combat experience in the game. Based on my personal playthrough so far, I determined 3 main rules that I try to follow. The first is to try and kill enemies as fast as possible rather than spreading the damage around. The second is to have actions and bonus actions left unused as little as possible. And the third is to put thought into the positioning of both area damage spells and the party overall. What are your main rules for combat in the game? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future. See you in Baldur's Gate 3.